This is an incredible love story that ends in death. After 73 years of marriage, this couple decided to legally end their lives together. George, 95, and Shirley, 94, have become one of the first couples in Canada to be legally allowed and choose to end their life together through medical assistance. And now they're the first couple to actually speak about this publicly. Their story, which you can read about in the link below, sounds like a fairy tale. So it kind of makes sense after reading their story about why they would eventually choose this in their 90s. I'm gonna read you just a little part of this article because it's very sweet and I wanna give you their backstory. They met in Halifax in 1944 around the Christmas season. George, then a sub-lieutenant in the Navy, was visiting a few days. George's mother intended to introduce his son and Shirley for some time. Shirley was in the Air Force, protested, saying she was already man. Where is this other man now is what I wanna know. So this is so cute. Then the grandma pulled out the picture of him and showed it to her, and she said, well, okay. Meaning like she basically saw how hot he was and decided to see this other guy. The two finally met. 6 days later, George proposed and Shirley said yes. That was quick, wow. And this was a quote. That was in itself astonishing. I can't believe that every one of those days translated over into decades of a happy marriage. They were awesome. Their love for each other shone through as their health declined in their advanced age. Shirley suffered from rheumatoid and osteoarthritis for over 50 years. So rheumatoid arthritis, just FYI, is really, really painful. So it sounds like for 50 years, she was having a lot of joint pain. Her family said her hands were, when it flared up, like purple claws. Aw. She would be unable to button up zippers or eat properly. And George, her husband, would help button up her shirts, complete tasks when she was unable to do it herself. So it says here that over the years, they both had significant heart problems and like bouts of influenza. George had a heart attack. Shirley had a broken hip and was in rehab. I mean, this kind of stuff happens as you age, right? George was 95 and Shirley was 94. So over the years, they obviously had health issues. So it says that George and Shirley had talked about assisted death as an option for nearly 40 years. So they were already planning and talking about it. See? Planning and talking about it, people. This is what I'm talking about. And it sounds like they became more and more sure that they wanted to do this after they watched another elderly relative kind of suffer the last years of their life. So once Shirley and George knew that this actually could be an option because it was made legal in Canada, they started going through the process to make this happen eventually anyway. And unfortunately, Shirley at the time was approved because she had this life-limiting, painful, chronic illness such as rheumatoid arthritis that was really affecting her life. So the doctors could approve her for the medical aid in dying. But unfortunately, George, her husband, was not approved because he was he wasn't sick enough or suffering enough with the diseases he had. Oh, so after this decision happened with the doctors, she was quoted in saying, "I cannot die, I cannot leave George." Oh, and one of their children said they were so worried that they contemplated ways to end their lives themselves. But soon after this initial rejection that George got from the doctors, he was able to get approved because as time passed, and him being very elderly, he did have a weakening heart and his condition started getting worse. So he was able to get approved as well. Oh my gosh, okay, so it says here that once they were both approved, they were so relieved that they could fly away together. There was a lightness that hadn't been there in a year and a half. Oh, George, lovingly described as a joker, had fun with the morbid subject. He said, "All this funeral planning is killing me," said his daughter. During one meeting with their doctors, George got up out of his seat to lay down flat on the floor. His wife, Shirley, said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Practicing." I like George already. So in the last week of March, sounds like they planned all of this, the family. They had the extended family come in and they basically threw a party, like a final toast for their farewell. It says they had dinner together and shared fond memories of the past. And I'm just going to read this because it's so beautiful. Hopefully I don't cry. On the evening of March 27th, the children, Angela, Pamela, and Sax, were in the room with their parents and the doctors. George and Shirley had champagne and lobster and toasted to their life. Dean Andrew Asbill from St. James Cathedral in Toronto administered their last rites. Angela rubbed her mother's feet and Pamela did the same to their fathers. They were standing at the foot of the bed. There was no fear. There was no hesitation. They embraced this process and they looked at each other. Oh, I'm gonna cry. Okay. The last thing Dad said was, "I love you all." You guys. Okay, so that was their final toast. I love you all. Then they peacefully die, right? When they called the funeral home to pick up the bodies, they had to explain why there was two of them. The funeral home takers were in tears when they arrived at the scene at the retirement home. He said, "We had never seen anything quite like this before. You know, they could barely get their hands apart." They're holding hands. You guys, whenever I do videos like this, there's always crazy comment section of people saying this is awful, this is murder, how can you be okay with this? At the end of the day, to me, it's not my place to say whether it's right or wrong. I still think this is a beautiful love story. A man who was 95, a woman who is 94, they've been married for 73 years and they ended their life peacefully together, to me is still a beautiful love story. I realize that's just my opinion and it can make other people mad sometimes. What do you think? I mean, I think it's interesting that in Canada, this is a legal thing and a priest from St. James came and gave them their final rites. And I feel like a lot of Catholic people would say this is wrong, but here is a priest coming and giving them their final rites. So I don't know, but I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you enjoyed the pictures. Please check out the article in the description if you want to learn more about this family.